Star Wars Echoes: The Trial of Darth Vader. Part 1. The air in the room was bitter cold, heavy with the sharp, metallic tang of Coruscant's high-altitude air filters. It was a hall once built for grand declarations of justice, but today it felt like a tomb. This session of the Alliance High Command is now convened, Mon Mothma announced, her tone clipped and formal. This is a closed tribunal to determine the fate of the defendant. In accordance with wartime security protocols, the existence of these proceedings and survival of the individual in question is classified under Security Directive 0. In the center of the floor stood the man who had haunted the galaxy's nightmares for over 2 decades. But the figure formerly known as Darth Vader looked less like a Sith Lord and more like a broken machine. His armor still bore the scars of the Emperor's fury, deep, jagged gashes that exposed the dull gray plasteel underneath. He did not move. He did not speak. He was a column of shadow in a room filled with light. Judges presiding, Mon Mothma continued. Chief of State Mon Mothma, Admiral Jial Akbar, and General Crix Madine. The massive double doors parted with a heavy, metallic hiss. A lone, cloaked figure stood on the threshold. The brilliant light of the city skyline cast a long, stark shadow that stretched across the courtroom floor. Witness for the defense, Luke Skywalker. Luke walked deliberately into the center of the room, stopping just a few feet from the pillar of scorched, black armor. He looked up at the tribunal, his gaze lingering briefly on each of their faces. Master Skywalker, Mon Mothma said, her brow furrowing. This is a closed hearing. You were not summoned. The Force summoned me, Mon, Luke replied softly. He stepped closer to the prisoner and placed a gloved hand gently on his father's ruined shoulder. The Force has no seat on this council, Luke, Mon Mothma said, her voice reclaiming its steady, rhythmic authority. And it does not grant you standing in a capital proceeding. You were the one who brought him to us. But your role ended the moment he surrendered into custody. My role doesn't end while there is still a soul left to be saved, Luke countered. He didn't raise his voice, yet the sheer resonance of it seemed to fill the room, pushing back against the sterile chill of the air filters. He looked up at the tribunal, his expression unwavering. The laws of the Republic, the very laws you claim to defend, entitle the defendant to representation. I am he. The judges exchanged tense glances. Admiral Akbar shook his head in silent resignation. Very well, Mon Mothma said gravely. This court recognizes Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker as witness for the defense. General Madine cleared his throat, pushing himself to his feet and consulting a data pad. The defendant stands accused of multi-count violations of the Galactic Charter and crimes against the common good, Madine read, his voice echoing off the stone walls. The prosecution enters charges of conspiracy and sedition, citing the defendant's instrumental role in the downfall of the Old Republic and the systematic destruction of the Jedi Order. In addition, the defendant is charged with acts of high treason against the citizens of the Republic, state-sanctioned genocide, extrajudicial murder, and systemic espionage. Luke tightened his grip on his father's shoulder, forcing himself to anchor his emotions as the charges continued. He forced himself to listen to everyone, acknowledging the horrific truth of them. There was no doubting that, as the Emperor's hand, Darth Vader had inflicted irreparable harm upon the galaxy. But that man was dead, destroyed in the inferno that swallowed his master and the second Death Star. General Madine finally finished, returning to his seat with a heavy sigh. How does the defendant plead? Mon Mothma asked. The dark obelisk remained entirely silent. The only response was the slow, mechanical wheeze of his respirator. Not guilty, Luke entered, removing his hand from Vader's armor and stepping toward the judge's bench. Mon Mothma, members of the High Command, the crimes you accuse this man of committing belong to a dead man. It is true that Darth Vader brought untold suffering to the galaxy, But that monster died when Anakin Skywalker returned to save his son. I have already detailed the events that unfolded in the Emperor's throne room in my official report. Indeed, Mon Mothma replied, her lip curling into a rare, bitter sneer. But one good deed does not absolve a lifetime of evil. Then consider the man he was before the Emperor's corruption, Luke argued, his voice rising with passion. Consider the numerous acts of heroism he exhibited during the Clone Wars. Anakin Skywalker saved countless worlds. There are millions across the galaxy, and even within the Alliance, who owe their lives to him. He was a good man. Duly noted, Mon Mothma said coldly. And yet, for every world he saved as a Jedi, he slaughtered an entire system as a puppet of the Emperor. The scales do not balance, Master Skywalker. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the chamber. Luke opened his mouth to counter, but the words caught in his throat. In the quiet, the mechanical wheeze of his father's respirator felt deafening, a jagged, scraping sound that seemed to mock Luke's desperation. Leia warned him this would happen. The memory hit him with the sudden force of a physical blow. In a quiet, dimly lit corridor of the Provisional Government Wing, Leia had confronted him. Her eyes, usually so fierce and unyielding, had been clouded with exhaustion, a mix of dread and pity. "Don't do this, Luke," she had begged, her fingers digging into the fabric of his black tunic. "Please, let the High Command handle it. The Council will decide what's best." She'd meant well, he knew that. She loved him, and she wanted to protect him from the fallout of defending the most hated man in existence. But she didn't understand. She couldn't. Despite everything Luke had told her about the throne room, about the man who'd saved his life, Leia would never look at Darth Vader with love. To her, there was no Anakin Skywalker. There was only the monster who had tortured her aboard the Death Star. The man who had held her back and forced her to watch as Tarkin turned her world to dust. How could he ask her to forgive that? How could he ask anyone to understand that the galaxy's most feared individual was somehow saved by a single, quiet moment of fatherly grace? Admiral Ackbar stood next, his large, dark eyes reflecting the grim solemnity of the room. The prosecution, having considered all charges, as well as Commander Skywalker's statements, remains in favor of conviction, Ackbar announced. But the defendant is far too dangerous, and his symbolic weight far too volatile, to remain in our custody indefinitely. It is therefore the recommendation of this council that he be put to death. A sudden, suffocating lump formed in Luke's throat. Though he had expected this outcome, the sheer speed of conviction caught him off guard. He had thought he would have more time to argue, more time to make them understand, before they moved so callously to a final execution sentence. Ackbar opened his mouth to continue, but Luke cut him off. The interruption was sharp, slicing through the formal cadence of the military tribunal. A sudden, burning flicker of passion broke through his carefully guarded Jedi composure, his voice echoing off the high stone walls. "The Empire has finally fallen," Luke said, his gaze locked onto Mon Mothma, then shifting to Madine and Ackbar. "The galaxy is watching us. Right now, in this very room, you are pouring the concrete for the foundations of something new. Something better than the tyranny we fought to destroy." He gestured broadly to the empty, cavernous room, his gloved hand trembling slightly with the intensity of his words. "Do you truly wish the first landmark action of this new republic to be state-sanctioned murder?" Luke challenged, his voice rising, carrying the weight of every life lost to the rebellion. "If we execute a prisoner who has surrendered, a man who is entirely at our mercy, how are we any different from the Emperor? Is this what the new republic stands for? Is our new beginning to be baptized in the same blood as the old?" Mon Mothma didn't flinch at the comparison to the Emperor, but a dangerous, cold stillness settled over her features. When she spoke, her voice wasn't angry, it was worse. It was entirely reasonable. "Do not lecture me on the foundations of this republic, Master Skywalker," she said, leaning forward, her hands resting flat against the bench. I spent 20 years watching our democracy bleed out while you were farming moisture on Tatooine. I know exactly what we are building, and I know how easily it can be broken." She stood up, her long, elegant robes sweeping the floor as she looked down at Luke, then let her gaze drift to the scarred, black armor behind him. "You speak of murder. I speak of survival," she countered, her voice ringing with the authority that had held a disparate rebellion together for a decade. "The New Republic is a fledgling. It will take us years, perhaps decades, just to stabilize the core worlds, let alone the farthest reaches of the galaxy. And you ask us to house the greatest mass murderer in galactic history?" She stepped out from behind the bench, walking to the edge of the elevated podium. "We do not possess the resources to contain him," Mon Mothma said plainly. "What prison could possibly hold a master of the dark side? What walls can withstand a man who can crush a throat with a thought? You say he is docile now. You say Anakin Skywalker has returned. But what happens if you are wrong? What happens when the creature that is Darth Vader re-emerges?" She pointed a sharp, accusing finger at the silent, wheezing obelisk in the center of the room. "The Emperor is dead, but the Empire is not. The Imperial fleet is scattered, broken, but they are waiting for a rallying cry. There are thousands of Moffs, Grand Generals, and governors who refuse to bow to a democracy. They will look for a figurehead. They will look for Palpatine's natural successor, the heir to the Empire." She looked back at Luke, her eyes hardened by the pragmatism of a veteran politician. "He is a living weapon of mass destruction, Luke. If the Remnant learns he lives, they will tear this galaxy apart to liberate him. He is too big a risk. The New Republic cannot afford to gamble its survival on your faith in a monster's soul." The next words from Luke's mouth were entirely unprompted, spoken aloud before his mind even had the chance to filter them. "Then release him into my custody." The words hung in the air like a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. The courtroom went utterly, violently silent. Even the mechanical, scraping wheeze of the respirator seemed to stall for a fraction of a second. Mon Mothma froze, her mouth slightly open, the sharp retort she had been preparing dying on her lips. Madine stared, his datapad slipping an inch in his hand, while Akbar's large, unblinking eyes widened even further. Luke didn't stop. The dam had broken. The words tumbled from his mouth in a frantic, breathless rush, as if he were reciting a script. "Release him to me," Luke urged, stepping closer to the judge's bench, his hands open and pleading. "We will leave. We will leave New Republic space entirely. I will take him as my prisoner, my responsibility, and we will journey into the unknown regions."